All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Councilwoman Sandoval, and I'm here today on this lovely Saturday morning to talk about a proposal to bring accessory dwelling units to parts of the Sunnyside and Berkeley neighborhood. I'm joined with my staff, Melissa Horn, who's here, and Libby Glick from CPD to help us ask questions at the end of the PowerPoint. If you have questions, please feel free to use the chat function or raise your hand, and we will get to questions at the very end of the PowerPoint. So here's the agenda of what we will be going over today. A welcome, the presentation about accessory dwelling units, next steps, and then the Q&A. So what are accessory dwelling units? They have several different names when you're talking about accessory dwelling units. You have casitas, you have a carriage house, in-law units, cottages, studios, guest houses. These are some of examples of what accessory dwelling units are and what they look like. Here are accessory dwelling units in Denver. It's an extra smaller dwelling unit in addition to the primary house on a single unit property. The key word is accessory to the primary unit. That's what is key for an accessory dwelling unit. There's two forms of accessory dwelling units. There's detached, that's an example on this page right here, and there's attached, so you could have one in your basement. Here's an example of a detached accessory dwelling unit, a living space above your garage. And here's a example of an attached accessory dwelling unit. It's attached to the primary dwelling unit. Here's an example of an attached basement unit. And here's an example of a home in Northwest Denver that is a attached basement and accessory dwelling unit. So accessory dwelling units in Denver are not a duplex, they're not an apartment, and it's not commercial, meaning mixed use. So here are some of the regulations that we have for Denver. Our code in Denver, our zoning code, sets the height, the overall size, setbacks, occupancy requirements. An accessory dwelling unit must be designed and compatible in composition and appearance to the main house. And a reminder, it has to be accessory to the primary. An accessory dwelling unit cannot be subdivided or sold off separately. And the owner of the property must live on the property to construct an accessory dwelling unit in Denver. Here are some of the benefits of an accessory dwelling unit. They can have financial stability. You can have family strength. You can have better neighborhood vitality, and it can increase safety. It can have extra income for people who are wanting to age in place. It adds gentle density to the neighborhood without changing the overall feel and look of a neighborhood by adding gentle density in the rear of your parcel lot. It can help to prevent displacement, and it can help keeping an eye on your backyard in the alleys, which are not always pleasant spaces. They can help make sure that you're reusing your backyard, the alleyway, instead of just having it for trash. So here's the proposal. We're having some in Sunnyside and some in Berkeley, and this is what's left in Northwest Denver to add accessory dwelling units in the urban context. Say today, if you wanted to have an accessory dwelling unit, if you wanted to rezone to get the zoning for an accessory dwelling unit, you would have to pay $1,000 and go through an extensive process. This proposal is that I would lead the process for everything in the teal colors, and I would lead that for multiple properties. I've done this before for Chaffee Park, Sloan's Lake, part of Regis neighborhood, and West Highland neighborhood. So here's a quick zoning explanation. So the U means urban, inner ring of suburban, single unit, fairly dense. That's the urban context. SU means single unit, And the C refers to the average zone lot size. So about 5,500 square feet are our average zone lot size here in this proposal. And adding a 1 after the C means that you are zoned to allow have accessory dwelling unit zoning. So what I'm proposing is to add the 1 into these neighborhoods. So here's the proposed accessory dwelling unit zoning in Sunnyside. The parcels in the teal color are the ones that we are proposing to rezone. Everything in the darker blue color already has accessory dwelling unit zoning. Everything in the gray is a different zone district, usually industrial. And then the green, the light green, is our parks that we have in the Sunnyside neighborhood. So once again, we are only focusing on the parcels in the teal color for the Sunnyside neighborhood. For Berkeley neighborhood, as you can see, most of the Berkeley neighborhood has accessory dwelling unit zoning. And what we're proposing is everything in the teal color. Everything in the purple color already has accessory dwelling unit. And you can see over here on 46th Avenue where my mouse is, this group of neighbors already have gone through the rezoning process for the accessory dwelling units, and they're one off these ones. So that means individual owners have gone through the process to get accessory dwelling unit zoning. So once again, everything in the purple is already zoned in the Berkeley neighborhood to allow this. We are only focusing on the parcels in the teal color. Here's what we've done for our outreach plan. So Melissa created an online survey and a website. We created a mailer, and all property owners, so even people who have rental properties, all owners were mailed a flyer. So everyone should have gotten one of these mailers. And then last weekend before this town hall, we had these flyers delivered to all the doors. So you had them on your screens, your screen door. We're tracking responses. Our goal is to get to 312 responses from the survey, and the survey will close in early January of 2024. And once we get some support, enough responses, I would move forward with an application to rezone those parcels that were in teal. So who's taken the survey so far? All of the red dots have taken the survey. So you see, I live in the Grandview area. I live right over here. So we have lots of people in Grandview. We have lots of people who've taken it in Harkness Heights. We have a scattering of people who've taken it over in this part of Berkeley, between Berkeley and Rocky Mountain Park. We have some people in Sunnyside and a little bit less over in this neck of the woods by Chaffee Park that have taken the survey. But here's I believe we have 188 people, 82 people who've taken surveys. So out of the 182, here is what we're polling so far. So out of the 182, we have almost 75% support for people who would want this. And we have a little bit over 20% of people who are opposed to moving this forward. So the people, if you said yes or maybe, what is your primary reason for wanting to build an accessory dwelling unit? And most people have put a guest, and then that's the highest. And then people are not going to plan to build an accessory dwelling unit, but they might want to just have the zoning. And then the two are running neck and neck, additional income and to house a family member. And this is what I saw in the 4 other rezonings that I moved forward with, is the biggest amount was the biggest polling was a guest for a guest house. So if the rezoning were to go through, would you build an accessory dwelling unit? Out of the 182 who have responded, the biggest polling question is maybe sometime in the next couple of years. And only like 15% said yes immediately. And then polling more, 35%, a little bit more than 35% are saying no, that they would only, that they wouldn't build. So here is what a rezoning timeline looks like. We had a pre-application. So my office with Melissa and CPD did step 1. Now we're on step 2 for the public outreach. Once we get to consensus or 300 and some survey results, I would submit an application. That application hits off the public comment period. So it would go to planning board, and then it would go to the land use, transportation, and infrastructure meeting. Then it would go to city council for first reading. And then the last step is a public hearing at city council. And that whole entire thing from the time the application is submitted to the hearing in front of city council takes about 4 to 6 months. And public comment is received during that entire time. Here's some resources. Here's the survey that we had sent out. My project manager is Melissa Horn, and here's her email and phone number. The ADU standards that were just adopted, Denver CPD, Community Planning and Development, just updated some new standards for accessory dwelling units that went through a public review process and lots of input from the public, and came to city council and were adopted. The Denver zoning code. And then we presented a while ago, I had another staff, Naomi, and she did a District 1 Ask a Planner. She was a planner, and she did a presentation on accessory dwelling units. So if anyone would like links to these resources, please let us know, and Melissa can copy them and put them in the chat so you have them. And now here's the part where I'll stop talking and we can answer some of your questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we could see each other and we could talk. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. I haven't been monitoring the chat, but you can also raise your hand if you have any questions, and we have myself to be able to answer them. And we have community planning and development. And if you don't know how to raise your hand, there's at the bottom of your screen, there should be a raise your hand function, and you can do that. Or if you don't, and you have your screen on, you can just literally raise your hand. Are there any questions from the presentation that we have so far? Are there any comments? Yeah, Mac, go ahead if you'd like to unmute.
Hi, this is Mac Prather. Thank you so much, Councilwoman Sandoval, for the presentation. We're homeowners over in Sunnyside, supportive of the effort here, so thank you. I was wondering also if you might share any outcomes from those neighborhoods where this kind of effort has already been successful. If there's anything anecdotally or in the data that could be shared.
So in the neighborhoods that I've rezoned, interestingly enough, the first one I did was in Chaffee Park neighborhood. So it's bounded by Federal, I-70, 52nd Avenue, and I think only one accessory dwelling unit has been built there. A couple of people had like accessory dwelling units already built. So now they were compliant and they were able to get permits and for people to occupy them. I know that several people in the Sloan's Lake neighborhood have actually moved forward and built accessory dwelling units, even in a historic district. And I know in West Highland, several people have been looking into building accessory dwelling units. And some of the concerns that we heard in those neighborhoods, that it would bring more parking issues, it would bring more people into the neighborhood. And I have not heard any of those actually come to fruition. When you build an accessory dwelling unit, and Libby, I could pass it to you, you do have a parking requirement currently. So it hasn't created a whole congestion of parking issues in the areas where I have seen in the 4 neighborhoods that I've rezoned. But Libby, do you want to answer, talk a little bit about, because the parking always comes up in these conversations. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So like Councilman said, we've seen a good handful built throughout, in different neighborhoods throughout the city. And yeah, I think we have yet to have a parking issue be realized. There are always concerns, but just the volume that we're getting is not generating enough traffic or parking, or maybe they're like the people that are renting them. A lot of times people want them for like their elderly parents. And so maybe they're not even driving a car and don't have it. So it's not necessarily generating extra vehicles.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns, feedback? Yeah, Beth?
I just mostly want to thank you for doing this. I literally came home and found a flyer laying on the ground in my yard. And I am the house that is right next to the group of 5 homes in Sunnyside. There's one more house next to me. And then literally the house on the other side is rezoned for it. And I am the person. I am post-divorce, left my beautiful bungalow in Platt Park. My financial situation is such that just having the option of doing an ADU for income would be lovely. Also, my parent is now 80 years old and facing all of those life decisions. So this action opens up possibility and choices for me in significant ways. So I just really appreciate your effort. I looked into starting this process a year ago and was kind of advised by the person that I was speaking to like wait and see what happened with some of the factors that were at play in the city. So it feels a little bit miraculous to me. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Beth. That's what I've heard too. My mom lives around the corner from me, and it's just turned 80. And it's an option that we would like for her as she wants to age in place. And so I think that that's a big factor for a lot of people who I've heard in this area. And I like to do this because in Denver, I'm a city council person, but I'm also the land use commissioner. So I wear 2 hats. And I'm always like, use that $1,000 towards your accessory dwelling unit to hire an architect or to hire someone. It's not much. I mean, in the grand scheme of a huge, like financing accessory dwelling unit, but if I can save in my constituents any money, I'm always going to look for that path. So thank you. Yeah. Thanks for joining us today. Mitch, you have your hand raised. Do we need to promote him, Melissa?
I've promoted him a few times, unfortunately.
Okay, you can talk. Mitch, if you want to unmute, you can go. You have the floor.
Okay, did you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, great. I apologize.
No problem.
Always happens, mute, unmute. You said there's a parking requirement for an ADU. So what does that entail?
Libby, want to answer that?
Yeah, let me pull up the code really quick. So I'm not saying incorrect information.
And Libby's a planner from community planning and development. So that's why we have her here with us today, because she's the subject matter expert.
Because I do know that for like, just a traditional home, there is no parking requirement. So let me confirm what it is.
I don't remember either after we did the new standards. I used to know.
Yeah, I'm in the code right now, and that's this urban section. So let's see here. Sorry, give me just a minute. Accessory dwelling units, here we go. So parking is not required for accessory uses unless specifically stated in this table or in an applicable use limitation. So yeah, generally parking is not required. I think even up to 2 units, like a duplex, doesn't require any parking. But like the councilman said, we really haven't seen, despite there not being a requirement for parking, we haven't seen many, I don't think we've seen any issues with parking, especially a lot of these neighborhoods. The neighborhood I live in has the same zoning as these neighborhoods. And, there's plenty of on-street parking. And I think traditionally people will, sometimes build to have their garage and want an ADU above it. So they may, in fact, have a garage space for their cars.
Yeah, I'm not particularly worried about parking. I was just curious what the requirement is. I've also heard and read things how difficult it was, or maybe still is, to build an ADU. I guess the city had some roadblocks, impediments. I know there's been a lot of talk about trying to make the process easier. Has that been put in place?
So there was an accessory dwelling unit project that went through that changed some of the forms to allow it to be easier for an architect to build, but there still are some hurdles, I'm not gonna lie. Getting a water tap is one of the bigger hurdles that I've heard, and its cost, and unfortunately the city doesn't have a way to fix that. That's not something that we have purview over. But I have had conversations with the governor's office and directly with the governor in the past 3 weeks, where the governor wants to bring in a bill during the next session to help subsidize some of the accessory dwelling units and the costs. And so they are looking into that. And then Denver has a program with, I can't remember what Renee's company is called.
The West Denver Renaissance,
Yes,
is that what you're talking about, collaborative?
Yes, West Denver Renaissance Collaborative, where if you wanted to build an accessory dwelling unit and you wanted to have it deed restricted to rent it out for 80% of area median income, you can get some money from the city to help with the construction of the accessory dwelling unit. So that is a program that exists, and people who are have the availability to have the zoning, you have to qualify for that, and then you can go through their process. But it's a great process. But I do know that the governor's office is looking at wanting to help with the costs of accessory dwelling units. So that's a great question.
And does the ADU need to have a separate water tap, or could it share with the main home?
Unfortunately, you have to have a separate water tap.
Okay, well, thank you.
You're welcome. Next up, we have John. You can unmute.
Hi there.
yourself. Hi.
Yeah, hi, Councilwoman Sandoval, appreciate you hosting the town hall. I'm at the point where I'm just gathering information, not really sure where I sit on this. And you described some of the benefits of rezoning and, saving the $1,000 application fee and speeding up the process. But I would wonder if you could speak to what are the benefits of leaving it in place, letting it be a kind of a case by case basis of approving this. Is there an upside to not doing a blanket rezoning?
In my opinion, no, because then every person has to pay the $1,000 fee, like Beth was talking about, and have to go through individual rezonings at city council. And so this way I'm taking one application with 1,600 homes through the entire process. I do know that in the conversations that I've had with the governor's office, he wants to propose a bill in this next session that would just blanket allow accessory dwelling units throughout certain areas, and Denver would be one of them. And so I don't understand how the outreach would happen on that. And so I'm a big proponent of doing lots of outreach and making sure constituents who live in my council district understand what's happening. And so that's why you've gotten a mailer and a flyer from me, and then I'll probably flyer again in December. So I want to have more information for you. So I feel nervous about having just the state come in and just blanket rezone things in Denver without being informed. And so that's why I'm doing this process. So I don't know of any benefit, quote unquote, to allowing each individual to just have to go through the process. Libby, have you ever thought about that question?
Yeah, I guess
No,
specifically,
I
I was
think from-
wondering like quality controls, like slowing down the process, having it be on a one-to-one type of review, if that had a quality control benefit to it.
I don't necessarily think so. I think because each whoever wants to come forward to actually build one, that they go through an individual site plan process with the city. But from a rezoning perspective, that's just getting allowing the use in the form, and from staff's time, like it's way more efficient to do these large neighborhoods, do large swaths of property than hundreds of individual rezonings, and then the council members are sitting through the same presentation over and over again, essentially. So I think it allows staff to put time towards maybe other priorities that the city has by doing these larger ADU rezonings, is what I would say.
Okay, thank you so much. That's a fair point.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, concerns? Enrique?
Sorry, I'm Vanessa. I'm
Vanessa.
we're
No
together. So in the diagram, I saw like a height, and we live like in a single like floor house, and we also have like aging parents. And so thank you for putting this initiative to start off with, because we are trying to think of our parents who are starting to age and we may have to cohabitate. And we were thinking maybe doing like an above garage, but that would mean our ADU unit would be 2 floors and our house is 1. And would that, is there like a specification or requirement that would limit that? Do they have to be the same height?
I do not believe they need to be the same height. I think you can go up to 24 feet under the ADU building form,
Thank you.
which would allow for 2 stories.
Yeah, there's lots of 1-story homes that have an accessory dwelling unit. In West Denver, Habitat for Humanity built a 1-story house and then an accessory dwelling unit in the back that had a garage, and it was on top of the garage. So I've actually visited that site out in West Denver. So I've seen it done before. Your accessory dwelling unit has its own regulations in the zoning code. So if you wanted to build one, they would be looking at the size of your lot and where your house sits, and then all of those regulations. But that's a good question. Did you have anything else? Okay, Michelle, go ahead.
Hi, this is actually Brian. I'm sitting here with Michelle.
No problem.
So I know you guys have done this in other neighborhoods.
Yep.
I'm kind of curious as to how you define success with the ADU program. So if you blanket rezone an area, are you anticipating 10 people taking advantage of this, 100, 200? I mean, what are you guys internally projecting?
So that's not my definition of success. My definition of success is saving each individual $1,000 to have to go through this process and having to pay someone. You have to write an application, and it's you have to base your application on zoning, on the zoning code and on criteria, and it can be very complicated. And so oftentimes people who go through the rezoning process, you hire like a consultant to actually write your application and have your applicant follow your application to planning board, to the land use committee, and to the final public hearing at city council. So for me, my version of success for my constituents is A, saving each person $1,000, B, saving community planning and development that time so that they don't have to spend time. It's boilerplate standard language now for accessory dwelling units. At planning board, they're usually put on consent agenda, like they're not even discussed. And so unless they want to unless there's an issue, they pull them off the consent agenda and vote on them. At land use and transportation committee, they're on the consent agenda. They're not discussed, and they're discussed finally at city council. So for me, my idea of success is saving the city time and making sure that we have, and then for individuals, money and time. A lot of times people don't understand the process. They get very, like Beth had mentioned, get weary about having to even know how to write an application, how to monitor the application, and how to follow the application. So that's my version of success. And then if people build them, and that's great. But that's not what my indicator of success is. But it might be different for the administration, because in Denver we have the legislative branch and we have the mayor's administration, which community planning and planning and development fall under the mayor. So Libby, do you all have a criteria of success in community planning and development? What you think is important for success for accessory dwelling units?
Yeah, so we don't have like a number necessarily. I think part of, we agree with your thoughts, Councilwoman Sandoval, on, just making things more efficient so then we can put our priorities towards other city initiatives. But I think the other, tricky piece is that maybe a few will get built this year, but maybe in the next 20 years, there could be a lot more being built. So it's hard to measure success when it's, it could be a long-term. Our zoning is very long-term. And so maybe it doesn't happen in the next 5, but in the next 10, maybe there's a lot more accessory dwelling units.
So I totally appreciate that. And I totally appreciate the fact you guys are recognizing the complexity and the cost in the process, because that certainly, I'm building an ADU is probably a $200,000 to $500,000 endeavor in today's climate. I just always find it interesting. We kind of set out agendas and goals with no game plan of what you want. Because I know Denver wants more housing, and that's going to lower the cost of housing. So,
Yeah, I will say
goals, and that's why I asked the question.
Yeah.
So,
So we don't have like a certain number of like, we want X amount of ADUs built, but I will say we are trying to expand. So like the West Denver Renaissance Collaborative, I know like they would like to expand their program, and the city has, helped partly fund that initiative with the Denver Housing Authority. And so I think the city does want to help move some of those types of initiatives forward, and that would be specifically like for deed restricted housing that would be affordable to people with a certain income. So that is something the city is definitely trying to encourage and move and to expand those types of programs.
And I think the creation of gentle density, especially in Northwest Denver, where after we changed the zoning code in 2010, what I've heard of living in the North Side my entire life is people feel like things were built out of character, and the character of the neighborhood has changed a lot. And so that has been something that I've taken into real great consideration. And I try to problem solve around. And this is a way where we're not changing the character of the neighborhood, but we are building more housing, and the accessory dwelling units are smaller in size, which everything's based on market, right? You rent your place based on market. And so if it's a smaller size unit, then maybe the thought would be that it could be rented for more attainable pricing. I don't use that word affordable because unless you deed restrict it and you're actually targeting an area medium income lower, then that's I think affordable, but it can be more attainable.
Yeah, and I think the challenge with affordable housing is that if you're going to spend a lot of money, you're going to look for some level of return, unless it's a personal investment for a family member or something like that. Okay. So that's kind of the pro and the con of the process. So I appreciate your feedback. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. John, did you have another question?
I did. I was just wondering if you could go into a little bit more detail on, for those who are interested in using an ADU for rental income, what are some of the limitations to that?
You kind of broke up there, but I can answer some of them. So any rental property in Denver, you have to have a rental permit. You have to get it inspected, a long-term rental property, and you have to get a permit. So I own a half a duplex in the Sunnyside neighborhood, so I've had to have that half a duplex inspected and then obtain a rental permit. If you wanted to short-term rental your property, you have to live in the main unit, and then you have to get a short-term rental license through the licensing department through excise and licenses. I don't know, I'm not as familiar with that because I don't have a short-term rental property, but you do have to live on property in the main house if you wanted to short-term rental your accessory dwelling unit. Anything else I missed, Libby?
I don't think so.
Okay. Did that answer your question, John?
It did, yeah. And in terms of short-term rentals, you're talking about like VRBO and Airbnb and whatnot. That's okay.
Anything under 31 days is a short-term considered, or 30 days is considered a short-term rental in Denver.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, are there any other questions, concerns, feedback? If not, we can end this presentation. I always want to give the virtual option, but we are having another town hall in person. Melissa, can you give us the information on that one? I don't have it right in front of me.
Sure, that'll happen this Wednesday, the 15th at 6 p.m. at Skinner Middle School. So if you would like to come, or you have friends or neighbors that are interested in this process, we encourage you to share that information with them, ask them to take our survey, and we look forward to seeing everyone on the 15th.
And thank you so much. And I just have to give a huge shout out to you, Melissa. Thank you for all your work on this project and the PowerPoint and the presentation. I know you've been really diligent about getting correct information. And thank you, Libby, for joining us on your Saturday morning. And I'm working on a day that you're not supposed to work. Same with you, Melissa. And we will give this same presentation at Skinner Middle School this Wednesday in person, but I always want to feel it's important to have a virtual option for people who may not be able to attend. My ask is that all of you on this call, please tell 5 people about this initiative, talk to your neighbors about this initiative, because we want to make sure that I'm representing you in a way where you feel heard. And with that, I'll let you get back to your Saturday mornings, and thank you all for coming out and attending today. And I appreciate all the feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.